Because in trying to get to know each other, let's take advantage of that's when we weave our trust. If we already have a national movement why do we invent another one? Let's weave that trust to be able to join those efforts, and that's really the work. So please give me. So while Amanda finds her presentation, we will have a brief space for Amanda. We will also hear an intervention, a virtual intervention or a speaker, and then we will have space for questions. So please write them down so as not to really delay the people who are connecting via Zoom. That's why we have this caveat. What is great about this, we will have a sort of we will be able to have a great overview. There's so many processes that haven't had the ability to go into the detail, and so hopefully this would be one of many workshops that we can that we can build. And Amanda, the floor is yours.
Muchas
Thank you,
gracias,
Susie,
Rosita. Muchas
Rosita,
gracias,
Peter, for your invitation. My name is Amanda Romero Medina. I have worked as a human rights defender, advocate. I know a lot of people. Now I'm an independent consulting, and I'm a teacher, I'm a lecturer also. And I want to show you some of the challenges and the facts when the companies manage the on corporate capture. So I have to move this way for recording, to the left. Yeah, well, to the left. So let us begin with the next slide, please. So I've been asked to participate in here in how were we able to have this combination of strategies between civil society to face that corporate power. It would be like the metaphor of David and Goliath. It's not that true, because if people are united and we have experiences, we are able to transform our realities. So we are going to talk about positive experiences on how you combine those strategies or steps that we need to take throughout this work. So the first strategy is the struggle or the defense on the Páramo or the wetlands of Santurban in the department of Santander, which gives water to 2 million people, and that's where the Zulia River, which is a Venezuelan river, is born there. So how the mining around those wetlands could affect, or the Páramo. I have set some links here. So the corporate veil, why is it so different? Because the company changed its name. So the company began by Gray Star. It was a Canadian company. Then it was called Eco Minerals. Then Minesa, Minerales de Santander. They will call Root Eagle, Red Eagle. And then lastly, Gordo, Gray Star, and Red Eagle, which was the last one, they filed a lawsuit against the national government because the government bans mining in the wetlands. And that means that there are some investors that are the ones that give out the money, which is the International Financial Corporation, which is a section of the World Bank that gives money to private companies so they invest in countries. So with Gray Star, but then we found that at the end we have United Emirates, Arab Emirates, and they come to invest in Santurban to seek gold and copper in addition to the other minerals mentioned by Ramon. So once we were able to analyze the transition, we began to realize that the processes take decades. For example, when people find out that there's a huge mining concession in wetlands, how through organizations such as the association, Inter-American Association to Defend the Environment, AIDA, we were able to review the environmental license that it's done by NGOs, local NGOs, and we were able in 2011 to revise that license. How can you do an open pit mining in a wetlands? And then in 2013, Colombian law was enacted to protect 76% of the area of these wetlands. We make an alert to an international instance called Ramsar, which protects water sources, and then international organizations such as CIED, an environmental organization, together with AIDA, they submit the case to the oversight commission in the World Bank to the invest, and finally the World Bank says yes, we were wrong, but the process continues, and the exploration phase continues. And so finally, through a class action by the CAJAR, by Juan Carlos Perez, who has a seat in Bucaramanga, and against the Ministry of Sustainable Development, back in 2016, there is a ruling from the Constitutional Court that allows to stop mining in the wetlands. But after this, the lawyers of these organizations, they said, amigos curie, or friends of the court, and they do this before CIADE. The CIADE is this international committee when they deal with conflicts, the arbitration. They do not admit allegations from civil society. They tell us, no, you have nothing to do with that. This is between the state and companies, no communities here. So in 2019, it's rejected. And in 2019 itself, organizations are victim of intimidation, persecution. So they go to the special rapporteur of the UN on the human rights and the right to the environment. The rapporteur immediately communicates to the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Colombia and with the Colombian government, and he requests protection for the people of the region who are fighting for the right to water. However, we will find that during that time, until 2020, there are the security chief of MINESA, which has the funds of the United Arab Emirates, against the people that were protesting, because they summon a huge entrepreneurial forum in the commerce club, Club de Comercio, and talking about the employees they give out, to the extent that the Luis Carlos Perez collective, they need precautionary measures. So they need to need to analyze how can they answer to this pressure. And then you will see in that link the response of the company is that there have been some officials of the company that were attacked, but they disapprove that the chief of security was against. Of course, they didn't agree that their security chief had hit one of the Now, it's named and shame. It's name the company and shame the company. This is done through a website, and this was done with an organization with which I work. The information and the company on human rights. So they were able to expose these companies publicly. It's the largest website around the world that follows in detail human rights violation where companies are involved. So when the company was exposed in that website, they immediately respond. And you can see the response of this company to exactly know.
To know how they organize themselves, as Rosita told you, how they manipulate information to always appear as benefactors and as victims. So, in this sense, we will see that the basis of this all is organized communities and national and international NGOs. You can have a good result if we only look at ourselves, as Rosita just said. We have to look for international and national connections. Regarding the right to petition, to have information and people's actions, and the other mechanisms as the tutela action, people's action, which are under the Constitution. And we also have to look for administrative mechanisms. It's been very important to have studies carried out by the Controller's Office, like the study that was done on the mining activities in Colombia. It was done during repressive governments, but it was very much in depth, and people, like the director of the Colombian Geographic Service participated in it. And then the legal mechanisms, the filing of actions against the companies. So you can work from different perspectives, but you have to look at three elements here. First, the possibility to find a link between the generalized violence that prepares the country. How, during President Pastrana's administration, the energy road battalions were installed. What are the connections between those battalions and Plan Colombia? And how was it that during the deployment of Plan Colombia, we worked back then in Putumayo, documenting the Plan Colombia situation, not only because of the glyphosate spraying that was affecting the environment, but also on women's sexual and reproductive health, and also effects on the assassinations and massacres that were happening. Behind the helicopter and the planes spraying, you had helicopters shooting, and there were bombs being thrown. So when you explain that, you understand why you have a mining company like Minero Cobre to settle itself in the territory because the land was already clear. So it's important to relate this context and have this documentation and have an explanation of the links between paramilitaries, local politicians, even the church, the different branches of it. Catholic evangelical churches in certain places promoted mining development. For instance, like in the case of Cajamarca, how the mayor and the parish were in favor of the company. So the next element is the research on the mechanism, the funding mechanism. Who's funding the project? I'm not saying who's behind the project, but ahead of it, because without money, that won't work. They have certain terms and certain deadlines and concerns with those that fund them. And as Francisco said, we have to look at the arbitration courts. We used to lose all the cases, now we're beginning to win some, thanks to changes in the people that are in the defense agency of the state. And there is something that was not mentioned yesterday. How can we use the United Nations Special Rapporteur's Office? How is it that the UN special processes can be used? So in this sense, we are going to look at the case of Cosahuca, which is a youth process against Anglo Gold Ashanti open pit mining. So here we have first and foremost how the company strategies unfold. The company is originally based in Canada. That's where the parent company is. But see how that parent company moves to South Africa. However, there's still a very direct relationship with Canada. And we have to go deeper in this with the Mining Watch, for instance, the Canadian organization that works on mining, because we have to see that projects appear with environmental licenses going back to Álvaro Uribe's administration in 2007. But today we have three large projects in this company: La Colosa in Cajamarca and Quebradona and Gramalote, located in the department of Antioquia. And our colleague from Jericho knows what this has meant. So there's there's a reporting against this company due to assassination and co-opting, intimidation, and community division from this company. So members of the community in favor of mining. And in this sense, we'll see how, in the case of Colombia, in the Gramalote project, the company, Anglo Gold Ashanti, extracts mines gold in alliance together with B2 Gold, a Canadian company. And we'll see how between 2017 and 2020, there will be reports and denounces, and these are links to the direct information that you can find due to agreements between Anglo Gold Ashanti and the public force in the south of Antioquia, southeast of Antioquia. So you'll find secret agreements between the public forces that includes the EDAs. EDAs mean the support structure of the Attorney General's office that are inside the companies. In the specific case of Ecopetrol, they have an office inside Ecopetrol to supervise and accuse before the Attorney General's office those that participate in protests. That's why we have actions against social leaders in the Department of Meta and Casanare being accused of being participating in criminal activities. EDAs, structures of support structures at the Attorney General's office, created under the administration of Uribe Vélez, reinforced under Santos's administration to identify and accuse social leaders that oppose mining projects. There's a report made by the Committee of Solidarity with the political prisoners. That was my first organization many years ago. So we find, for instance, denounce a report 2 years ago of how mining in San Roque, Antioquia, was being developed in the midst of paramilitarism. Saying that at this point, paramilitaries have finished their conviction of 8 years and they have returned to the territory and they reorganize themselves. Next, I'm running out of time. Next slide, please. Just 1 minute. So, litigation goes hand in hand with the social mobilization. So, for instance, in the case that we are talking about here, Cajamarca in Tolima, there's retaliation against the social movement. 3 assassinations, Cesar Garcia and Camilo Pinto in 2013, and a casualty that has no explanation. The company says it was suicide. This is a very young man that died in 2014, but then people consultation was done in 2017, and it wins with 97% of the votes. There's an intervention from the United Nations, 31st July 2023, and then there's this year a decision from a local court that says that declares that there should be no mining activities being carried out in Cajamarca. So when we talk about strategic actions against public participation, in English, we talk about SLAP. SLAP is the translation of strategic lawsuits used by companies against the organizations, which in Colombia have the shape of the EDAs. Between January of 2015 and March 2023, the Research Center identified 437 lawsuits with these SLAP characteristics filed by 144 companies, of which most of the cases happened in Latin America and then Asia and the Pacific. Most of the people and the groups that were the object of the lawsuits qualified as SLAP had laid out their concern in relation to projects in these sectors: mining, agriculture, and ranching, and felling and timber, 35 cases, and oil palm, 28 cases. For mining, 128 cases. So, under this concept, we find that when we use the special procedures, when companies use, for instance, the media, you start seeing intimidation and the use of fake news against the leaders of Cosa Hoca. So we resorted to Mary Lawler, the special rapporteur on the defense of human rights, and she interviews our colleague Robinson directly, who is the person that is being threatened and on whom fake news had been published, and she promotes a joint communique of the United Nations Working Group on Companies and Human Rights, being her the rapporteur and together with the rapporteur on the environment. And this is interesting as a strategy. The UN rapporteurs address themselves to the South African and the Colombian governments, that is to say, the companies where the headquarters are or the parent companies. It's interesting that the United Nations writes to the companies as well. And the result of this, you can read it on this link. And the result is that 2 months, 60 days are given to the companies and the governments for a reply. So what do? We can use that for the purposes of activism and mobilization, saying the United Nations wrote this to the company. This is the answer from the company, and this is what has continued happening. And in this way, Robin's situation is much more protected and it's much more visible because his profile is more visible now. So in this context, and I'm going really, really fast, I don't have time to present the case of the power company, water power company of Anchicaya. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so as I was saying, at the beginning, the company that built the Anchicaya River Dam, where the river is born, where the cascade comes down to channel the river, it was called Unión Fenosa, and it was a Spanish company. But this company decided one day, well, remember, a dam has like this vessel that it gets filled up, and when it is filled up, that's when the turbines start to work. But it turns out that this starts to be filled up with sediments because that's not the usual situation. So the useful life of a dam is 25 to 30 years. So Unión Fenosa thought in 2001 to open the gates without informing people about this, and they just discharged all the sediments that killed all the fish in the Anchicaya River, along which people lived. But they flooded with rotten muds all the crops that grew on the banks of the river, and they contaminated the water. People couldn't even take a bath in the water of the river because they would get rashes, and it made it difficult for the river to be used for navigation. And they didn't know that Unión Fenosa became Emgesa later, and then Emgesa was sold to Endesa, an Italian company. But that Italian company is sold to Energía del Pacífico, EPSA. And EPSA today is sold again to Celsia, which is part of the Argos group. So how do we know about this? Because we started to find out about the trajectory of the company. So it is always important to find out who the company really is. And that's why we're concerned that we're always saying that it is the state's fault. But we remember that the state is at the service of the company. So who is the company here? In whose interest are they there? So you will find these hyperlinks. The use of resources of national and international jurisdiction, it is very lengthy. For 30 years, they have been fighting, in this case, 23 years. There was a report before the Ministry of the Environment in 2001 that led to sanctions until the following year. People didn't have the means to even eat a fish. There's a preliminary consultation, free and informed, in 2015, whereby the company is obliged to carry out an environmental management plan. Then communities submit a petition, right, to verify the quality of the water. There is a class action then that is started or filed, a class action that has favorable decisions in the first and second instances in a court in Buenaventura and in the higher court at Valle. Then the company uses justice too and files a tutela action, a people's action, for this victory to be denied. The victory that was obtained at the higher court in Valle, the company is saying, you cannot stop me. What I'm doing is benefiting the communities. So based on this, there is a decision of unification of four people's actions, including the company's one that the court will not consider. And we have this decision in 2015 confirming the decision of the judges in the first and second instances, which considered that the action presented by the company was not constitutional. So we have already 2 decades of a river being contaminated where people did not have any food and had many problems because this was the means that the people had for survival. So in 2013, actions were presented, and 19 years went by without with nothing happening. So in the work that we have done with the Special Rapporteur for Economic and Social and Environmental Rights of the OAS, with them we managed to revive the case. But because we have this decision from last year, if you want, we have the complete text of this decision, which is very lengthy and very interesting. Okay, so that you know the terms of it. So we have to increase the environmental knowledge. We have to increase the environmental knowledge and the knowledge on human rights. Also, the knowledge of the judges regarding the arbitration bodies and courts. We have to learn how to face an environmental impact assessment that is weak or non-existing. And we have to learn how to partner up with the Water Global Partnership. It's a world organization that helps us check the quality of water, for instance. How to maximize influence, how to combine legal interventions and local interventions with international companies and campaigns. Understanding the work of a campaign as a strategy that combines activities with hearings in the European Union and the countries where the parent companies are based, and also to compare it against international courts. We can think of Mexico here, that is using a French court for a French power company. Or how could we use decisions? How decisions have to be appropriated by the community to work on it and continue moving it and to increase the knowledge of the actions of a company before the consumers also. The water that you're drinking comes from this and this, and using the rights of societies. How a change in the name is no longer an obstacle for transparency. Or looking at cases, for instance, in Honduras against companies that were abusing and employees that died because they were not given the right equipment in their activities and harvesting lobsters. How to propitiate legal reforms and use these and face this legislation that promotes abuse, and how to go to government so that they guarantee the norms under these judicial procedures so that communities have these resources, these instruments, and they can really counteract the suits or actions against community participation.
No, Amanda, muchas gracias.